let's talk about equipment. So the one that's going to be the front runner on this is obviously weapons and armor, because that's the stuff that that's your player's bread and butter now, isn't it? You know, if you could strap bread on to yourself with some sandwich bag tie strings in between, and if that would indeed protect you from a dog trying to stick its nose through your armor, and then post its face on Instagram. So basically things have stats, they have features, and there's the different kinds of things in this game, the pistols and the rifles and the heavy weapons and all the rest of it. But all that really matters is the main kind of stats and the rules that go with it. So when you look at a weapon, you will see bonus, and it will say nothing, or it will say plus or minus or whatever, and that's just like +2, +1. That's how many extra dice you get to roll onto your base dice for using that item, but only if you're using that item. So if I point a Magnum revolver, that's got a +1. So, little +1 there. And then it would have a damage. So in the case of the Magnum revolver, it's got damage 2. Range, they would have a range. In this case, medium. What that means is it can fire up to medium and no further. So it's not talking about bonuses or a most effective firing range. It's just literally the range it can fire at. Weight, which will have a number or a fraction. So if it's 1, it will take up 1 of your inventory slots. If it's 2, it will take up 2. If it's a half, it will take up half an inventory slot. So if you're lucky enough to have 10 slots, and you put a service pistol in, which is weight half, then you would have basically 9.5 slots left. You'd have to be strength 5 to have that much inventory carrying space, of course. If you remember the rules on strength, encumbrance, capacity. And of course, in some cases you'll see quarter, so it's obvious that that's quarter of a slot, and you could fit 4 quarters on one inventory line, for example. And then it will say cost in dollars, because currency for things like campaigns would be important, or trying to buy the items, shopping. And then a comment for any special rules. So some of the things you might see here is armor piercing. What that means is it halves the armor dice used by anyone testing against it. Single shot, which means that you'd have to do a reload immediately, which I think is a slow action. I think it's one of those try and remember what you've read type thing at that point. Full auto, you might see full auto, which means you get to do the full auto rules. You get to keep firing it, but of course you gain a stress by doing that. Grenade launcher can be a special feature, so that would be worth reading up on, but it's just going to be some sort of like blast. And the blast rules are pretty clever in the Free League Mutant mechanics, because the way they've done it is they differentiate between whether you are at in direct range of it or how far away from it you are, and what the blast power is of how many dice versus potential. And then those are rolled, and successes are damage against you, and that's pretty cool. So those a bit further back from the blast won't have so many dice against them, and so on. Armor doubled. So some things, like the Armor Model 37A2 12 gauge pump action shotgun, is a armor doubled. So what that means is anyone you shoot with it gets to actually double their armor score. So it's not particularly good against armour at all. And indeed, some weapons will have their own power supply. So in the case of the plasma pulse rifle, bi-armoured, it is armour piercing, but it has a power supply of 5. So what that means is you fire the weapon, you roll 5 dice, and any ones that come up, you reduce the power by that amount. So you could have a really bad time of it and just suddenly roll 5 ones. Of course, the theory would be, from a designer's point of view, that it's self-balancing, because as your power goes down, you're rolling less dice for the check, and if you're rolling less dice, you've got less chance of rolling ones. Does that make sense? So you lose power quicker earlier on, and it's only when you hit 0 you're really actually in trouble, because you've then run out. So 1 is no worse than having power 5, except that it's closer to running out, which is good. It's a good rule, I thought. Personally, I'm okay with it. It was suggested before by one of the commenters on the video. Thanks for tuning in. And just asked, is all that necessary here in this RPG? And it's a really good question, because these supply levels and tracking all of this. And normally I would say no. Normally this isn't the sort of thing that I would be interested in. But you know what? For these mutant games, for playing mutant, which is what this derives from, where you're exploring the zone with that Fallout sort of wasteland feel, there's always this feeling of exploration and uncertainty and supplies, knowing that bottle of water is actually going to become a crucial narrative point. Cause, if you played without it, it would be less frightening and less intense. So it depends. You'd be sort of you'd lose that. You'd be making it more arcade. And the one thing I always appreciated when I play something like Fallout is, you eat or drink this, you gain some rads. That's all like you're just trying to do a simple thing like drinking some water or whatever, and you're gaining rads. Or you might have a zone that you walk into and you start like taking radiation damage that way. And so it's that feeling of just trying to hang on in there. I think it works here, being like a sci-fi survival horror, and that's the point really. It's a survival horror. It's not just a horror. It's not just like an encounter. It's survival from the point of view that the odds against you are on such a... Well, they're so bad because of the kinds of entities involved sometimes, and how proficient they are as stalking machines, self-propagating monstrosities. I'm looking at you, Queen Facehugger. You have to do the twisty change thing and do make one of them. And also just the sheer scale of the setting, these vast ships and planets and planetoids, and just the scale of how bad things could get at that level. Mass weather effects and, just a hard time of it. A hard time. Grenade launcher. On some of the grenade launchers here can fire other grenade types. You'd have to switch to some of that. Stun effect. The electroshock grenade, for instance, can do a nice stun effect. So at that point you'd have to take a look. But for instance, with the stun baton, I can see the rules here, where someone taking damage from it does a stamina roll, and failure is that they're stunned for a round, and then of course using it is a power supply in the case of the stun baton, power supply 5 in this case. But it's scary, because you've got the suits of armor and such as well. And those you'll see an armor rating, so that's how many dice you get to roll if you take damage. If to try and negate it in your roll, 6s to negate that damage. It'll have an air supply, so it just uses the supply rules, and then the roll every when as per type deal. So if you do something really, really physical, you might then have to do a quick air supply, or every turn otherwise, or whatever, do a quick air supply roll. I mean, even something like 5, it doesn't sound like it would just last and last and last. You can't just hang about and hope it's going to be fine. You've got to try and get the power and get the air turned back on in a situation, or not be out there and doing a spacewalk for a ridiculously long amount of time. It's got a weight amount as per before, cost, and again comment. So like the personnel armor, built-in comm unit, you know what that is. It might have minus or plus stats. It might give you a bonus to something like that. It might have a it might have plus to a skill like survival +3, something like that. So that's cool. And of course we've got the powered workloader. We've got access to here. So we've even got the stats for computer mainframes, even the different models of Mother. And there are several different ones, and that's obviously useful for things like campaign mode. If you've got your own ship and you want to say, I don't know, upgrade your AI, get a new version of Mother, or just say screw it, I'll get an Apollo instead. And then we've got for the gear here, we've got loads of stuff: data storage, diagnostic and display stuff, a lot of which you'd recognise from the films. Some of these things, like the pups that they send out in Prometheus to scan everywhere, and they kind of like self-float and just all float through the place. They're really expensive, so you can tell that was backed by Wayland. Vision devices, tools you can use, supplies, medical supplies, pharmaceuticals, food and drink, vehicles. We're not going to touch upon vehicles, really. I'm not going to get into that, but we'll leave that here. We've covered a lot more ground, discussed the rules, and this is really to drive you to a point where you can be confident trying to play the game in conjunction with one of these bad boys, of course. Ideally, or maybe sort of hear everything I've got to say and see if this is where you want to actually jump in. It's more than a review, isn't it? It's a this is what it is. I very, very rarely tell you what I think of it. I do a little bit, and I can only talk about it in concept because I haven't played it, but I have had experience in Mutant, so I do like Mutant as a survival game, and I'd be interested in running my own hacks using this system as well for other stuff. So watch this space. I'll see you at the next one.